rise like morning sun, chasing points, the game's begun. Big decisions week by week, fantasy glory's what we seek. Pick your squad, the clock won't wait. Captain choice will seal your fate. Two enthusiasts breaking it down. Fantasy kings, we're taking the crown.
All right, welcome back everyone to another episode of Tinker Time, an FPL pod, the show for every fantasy Premier League manager who's already second-guessing their first draft. It is Thursday, July 1st, 2025, and whether you're wildcarding in preseason or just here to scout some differential forwards and keepers, you've come to the right place. I'm Matt, alongside Jim. We're here to help you tweak, test, and yes, tinker your way to the top of your mini leagues. We'll break down the best value picks, fixture trends, and hidden gems, so you don't have to stare at your squad screen in despair. So let's pop the hood, crack open the spreadsheet, and get tinkering. Jimbo, long time no talk. How's it going?
I'm doing well. How have you been?
I'm going to be very honest. It has been a whirlwind of a week. Just outside of FPL, I have found some comfort in tinkering at times this week. But that being said, I am super excited to be with you today talking about everyone's favorite position, forwards, and let's not forget those keepers.
Did do some tinkering after we talked last. I listened to some of our advice and I made 2 moves in the midfield. I was trying to open up some more funds to get in a different forward, but I couldn't make it happen. So maybe I'll convince myself if that's the right or wrong move after tonight.
Yeah, so I think we'll have this episode kind of follow a similar format that we did with some of the other positional deep dives. We'll start kind of just going through those premium forwards. Spoiler, we're going to talk about Holland, and then we'll get into some of those mid-priced, mid-tier forwards, and then some of those budget picks towards the end. I'm hoping we'll also have time, like you said, to kind of get in and take a look at each other's teams, do a little tinkering on the fly. So why don't we just get right into it? And with that being said, I kind of spoiled where we're going to lead things off. But, I think as we were kind of getting ready to put together the format for this episode, I found that there was a lot of similarities with how we talked about midfielders. That being, kind of what is the strategy? Interesting with forwards, we have one forward who is clearly priced above them all, and that being Erling Haaland. I think just to kind of kick the conversation off, I'm curious your take, because I think when we talked about it with Salah, as far as midfielder went, the strategy was, do you go Salah and you maybe get a few cheaper midfielders to complement or supplement that midfield line? I think the same question holds for Haaland, but for me, at least in my opinion, I think the drop-off in forwards is a lot larger than the drop-off in midfield value. But just wanted to kind of get your take.
Agree. So I think as a player, obviously he's phenomenal, and he's scored, I think it averages out to like a goal a game across all the leagues he's been in. So his consistency is unbelievable. And I think the other thing is going for him is that he's nailed as a starter in the City squad. Mo, I think I was hesitant about him last week. That was pretty clear. And part of that is that I thought you could get better value in Liverpool with chipping in for hedging some of those points that Salah scores. With Pep's rotation the last few years, Haaland being the only one that you could really count on, I think he's almost a must-have in the squads to get that coverage for City points.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm a little hesitant. Obviously, Haaland is going to be there. His health came into question a little bit towards the end of last campaign. He made its way back. I think it was for game week 36, which for some folks kind of threw their chip strategy off a little bit. I know myself, I was intending on triple captaining him. I forget who they were playing, but it was on a double game week. And his injury kind of forced me to go a different route. But he did make his way back. I don't remember if he returned, but I think the biggest thing this year with Haaland is, he's not someone who necessarily you're going to put the ball at his feet and he's just going to create for himself. I know that's kind of been a little bit of his criticism over the years, that, he's playing for City. He's got players on the wing like Mahrez or Foden on the left, or even, Doku or Savinho now. He had KDB in the mid, just kind of pepper balls in, and he'd be the beneficiary of that. City looks a little bit different this time around. Is Haaland going to be able to produce a little bit more on his own in order to reach some of those goal and assist numbers that, he's seen in previous seasons and really justify that 14 mil cost? Or are we going to see him take a step back, but still really be kind of that top tier forward? I mean, even if he was still outputting, let's say 15 goals or 16 goals, that's still top tier performance for a forward. So I don't know. I mean, do you think that City's kind of re-envisioned squad or some of those key departures that they have, do you think that's anything to keep in mind, or is it more so that Pep is still there? He's going to find a way to get his golden goose's gander.
Well, I think we gotta, in context, you said he kind of took a step back last year. He had 22 goals. So that's what you're looking for, the highest priced players in the game. I think only Isak had 23, and what did Salah have? 29.
Something
So,
like that.
those three are really in the conversation of the premium options. So I don't think we should be leery of the fact that he doesn't have the same players around him. He's still an amazing player. Marmoush came in. He's going to be, if not a starter, consistently playing with him. Foden, he's played with him for years now. Is he going to get more time with KDB gone, Grealish gone? That opens up some more time for Savinho and Doku. So it's players that he's played with before. It's not like they're a complete reboot. So for that reason, I'm not concerned about them taking a step back as a team.
So
And I
you're
think
bringing Holland into your squad.
I am. And I think we mentioned it for the defenders, but with Rodri coming back, how much better are they going to be this year than they were last year? And I think that's going to be a big bump, and maybe we'll see once the season starts that City players were undervalued or their price was lower than really they should be based on last year's expectation, but we know how much of an impact he has and how much more ball handling they have when he's in the squad.
Yeah. And I think all signs point to him being nailed for penalties as well. So, when you're looking for players, you want them to have as many goal opportunities. I tend to think that he's going to have a still relatively very high number of opportunities compared to the other group of kind of premium forwards. But he really is in a class of his own. I mean, let's take a couple of other names that are in that premium category that, we would kind of put up there in that top tier based on performance and price. Alexander Isak, phenomenal season. He's actually at 10.5 mil, up 2 mil from last season. 23 goals,
Jump.
6 assists.
Big
Huge
jump.
jump for him. The big question around him right now, he's obviously voiced his displeasure and his desire to leave Newcastle. Is he going to actually make his way over to Liverpool? I did see today reports that they agreed on personal terms. I think I saw something like he'd be there till 2031, but we'll see. If he joins that squad, do some of his numbers get a little bit diluted, having to share some of the goal opportunities with Salah, Ekatike, Ertz, even McAllister, Abislai, who are going to get up pretty high and put some balls in the box as well? I don't know. Those are things that, for me, I want to see how this kind of transfer window shakes out before I would bring Isak into my squad. What do you think?
I agree, yeah. So he had 23 goals, but he was on pens last year. He's not going to be on pens if he does move. And frankly, if he stays, do we trust him to perform consistently with where he was last year? So to help him in attack, they brought in Alenga, right? I think that's the only other attacking player they brought in. Wilson's gone, so he really is likely not going to be splitting time. I think the Champions League, didn't they do like a 60-30 or some
Something like that.
version of that split once the other competition started? But I agree. For me right now, he's a wait and see. Honestly, I think I like him better on Newcastle than if he does move to Liverpool, simply because he's not going to be on pens, and there are all those attacking options. Are they necessarily going to score more goals than they did last year? It's hard to imagine because they did so well.
Yeah.
So I have to imagine he would not have the same return that he had this year at Liverpool. Excuse me.
Yeah, it's
Freaking coming in at 9, right? That's the next price bracket down.
9 mil. So interestingly enough, I don't know if folks maybe necessarily realize this, but he is actually a former Brighton player. If you remember, I think it was from the 2018 campaign, or maybe it was 2017. He technically featured in the Prem for Brighton. Now, I don't believe he had any impact whatsoever. His prowess has really been, developed since he's been at Sporting. I just thought it was interesting that this was a guy that years ago, and age plays a factor as well, right? We don't all peak when we're 23 or 24 years old. Some folks take a little more time to kind of come into their form, but you know,
When did you come into your form?
um, I'm still coming, but I think my best years are probably behind me. I would say. I think I'm at the point now where like I walk up the stairs and if I don't feel pain in my knee, like it's a good trip. But then I worry about going down the stairs and I feel the pain. So it's we let's move on from me.
Okay.
So a lot of reaction to his performance against Spurs today. Who shout out to Spurs filling up that trophy case with the
That was a huge win.
well, I don't even. I think it was like the Herbalife Trophy or something like that. We win so many
Hong
trophies.
Kong Invitational, something like
Something
that.
they're winning so many trophies. It's hard to keep pace with all the names, but that's neither here nor there. But a lot of Twitter reaction was, hey, he was in there for 20 minutes or so. Gyökeres didn't even like touch the ball. So I don't know what you can really make from that. Is that someone who just hasn't gotten a lot of preseason minutes, who's just kind of getting out there to, get his feet underneath him a little bit? Is he really involved in the attack? Spurs won 1-0, so not really much on the attacking side from those Gooners, but he has been probably the most hyped forward, I think, transfer wise, that we've been looking at all summer, other than the Isak news that had came out. From what I've read, 9 mil seems like a bargain when you're looking at Isak or Holland and their prices.
Hmm.
Definitely somebody that if you kind of play the players and positionally the right way, you can absolutely afford him. But from what I have read, Arsenal right now, they do not have anybody completely nailed on pens. Arteta was quoted saying that, between Saka, Odegaard, Gyökeres, they're going to figure out who's going to take it, which I don't love hearing that as an FPL manager.
Yeah.
I've also heard that depending on who their opponent is going to be, they might actually choose to start Havertz either in place of Gyökeres or alongside him. So that could be interesting. I don't know if that, negatively or positively would impact his ability to return. But anytime I hear that, someone is going to compete for minutes or touches, it kind of puts me off a little bit. I don't know. What are you hearing?
Well, I'm not hearing it. I don't have any inside sources, but I agree. I don't love him right now. He might turn out to be good. He might turn out to be great. He might turn out to be another striker that comes over from Europe with big numbers and can't cut it in the Premier League. So with all that uncertainty at 9 mil, I don't think he's worth it for me at the moment. Yeah, I think there's better value at cheaper or bumping up to even Isak. Even with being uncertain about what his role will look like if he goes to Liverpool, I think I'm more confident in him than an unproven striker from Europe.
Yeah. And I think if you were to take a look at our other popular forward priced at 9 mil,
Hmm.
Mr. Ollie Watkins, right? If you had to choose between the two, to me, right now, Watkins is the clear choice.
Yeah.
Watkins coming off a very strong campaign, 186 points, roughly, if I remember correctly. But he also, I believe, began the campaign not nailed. I think coming off of Euros, I don't know if it was a fitness related issue, if, Emery just kind of was trying out some different formations up top, but I don't believe Watkins was nailed to begin the campaign. So for him to end up in kind of that top tier, not really
You sure
see
about
a
that?
price drip, that's how I remember it. I could be mistaken.
I thought he was on. Maybe it was just rest. I don't.
It could have just been
I don't
rest.
recall.
There was a lot of football played last year,
Yeah.
and knowing that Villa was going to have European competitions as well, maybe just trying to kind of ease him back in to the Premier League season. That may have been all it was. To be
Yeah.
honest, when I would follow Villa, a lot of it was not necessarily focused on Watkins because I didn't really have him in my squad much last season. He is getting a half a mil rise in price. What that telling us is the FPL is trying to adjust for someone who is that premium forward. Some small rumors, or I don't even know if we could call them rumors, but he was linked to United. Add him to the list of 8 or 9 other forwards who were linked to United, and nobody wants to go there. But just comparing, it's hard not to compare Watkins to our boy Victor. Both at 9 mil, one's coming off a very strong season. It's one of those things also where Watkins isn't really likely to drop in price that week 1 or 2. So it's one of those things where if you want to bring Watkins in, because Villa do have those nice fixtures,
They have a great run.
and if Yorkers goes off, you might still be able to make that switch before he goes up in value as well. And that goes the same for Izak, right? So if you want to bring in Izak, or if you have Holland in your squad to start, you can literally afford any other forward. So it's just a matter of, am I gonna regret like not having them in for a week or two? As long as you pull that trigger fast enough, you're gonna make it up.
Yeah, and Watkins has the nice run early, but Holland gives you that flexibility to get to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. The question though, at 9 mil, there are some nice options in the 7.5 mil range, and we'll get to them in a minute or so. I did just want to take a few minutes and talk about your boy Jared Bowen, who has
Well,
been reclassified. But
but
go ahead.
before we move on, there's rumors of Rogers, your guy Rogers, who we know you had the midfield, leaving Villa. If that does happen, I think that really hurts Watkins' potential.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. Rogers, I think the rumors you're hearing are probably the ones Rogers to Chelsea.
Yes.
Rogers was, I think, from an FPL asset perspective, very solid last year. Definitely a value pick to begin the season, but midway through, if you didn't have him in your team, you were kind of just stubborn, in my opinion, because he was so well priced. He was
Yep.
nailed for 90 minutes, and I think he had 8 goals and 11 assists by the time the campaign wrapped up. A lot of those assists to Ollie himself. So I get what you're
Yeah.
saying. If Rogers were to leave, is there someone who's going to step in and kind of play that role to feed Ollie a lot of those balls in the box that allowed him to get his points? That's a fair question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah. So that was my concern, is that I did have Watkins for most of the season last year, and I think he never went off on huge games, but he was consistent. I think he had double digit assists. So even he wasn't giving you those huge swings. He wasn't really a captain consideration for me, but he was consistently getting the points. Which, if he loses his support around him, is really going to deteriorate. So just something to consider,
Yeah,
especially with Rashford already gone.
yeah. Well, and that I think is a nice segue. So, does that in turn kind of justify Watkins' price, or I should say, justify bringing Watkins into your team at that price point? You could bring someone in like Jared Bowen. So, Jared Bowen is reclassified this campaign. He was a midfielder. He's now going to be classified as a forward at 8 mil. 13 goals, roughly, I believe, last year, coming off a really, really good campaign. For me, it's just a question of how much do you believe in West Ham? Right. We just saw news today that Lucas Paqueta was actually cleared of any sort of gambling related charges for some match fixing or match impacting or whatever it's called, which is great for West Ham, not so great for us as FPL managers, right? Now Bowen goes from possibly nailed as a penalty taker, as a forward, to maybe being second choice. We'll have to see if Paqueta really takes penalties and kind of runs with them. But that being said, if you're selecting a forward just purely for penalties, maybe you shouldn't be selecting them.
Agree. Um, and honestly, I think his move to the forward hurts him. I was always a big fan of him. I didn't have him last year, and I kept trying to get him in at the end when he was returning every week. I couldn't get him in, and it kind of hurt me in the end. But I think moving to forward, losing out on the clean sheet opportunity, and taking one of your 3 forward spots at 8 mil, that's a lot for me to be confident in him, given how poorly West Ham performed last year.
Yeah. So I will give a little bit of a spoiler here. I actually have Bowen in my week 1 squad today. And I'll tell you why. Their first game, they are playing none other than Sunderland till I die. I love that fixture for West Ham. I could see West Ham beating up on Sunderland. Maybe not necessarily a clean sheet, but I could easily see Bowen getting in there, wreaking havoc on their defense, getting a goal or an assist or maybe one of each, which would be phenomenal. I am possibly looking to actually start the season with a mil in funds in the bank,
That's
with
rare.
Bowen being potentially my first move from that 8 mil to Watkins. But we'll see, right? I don't usually like to keep money in reserve, especially off the rip.
A million's a lot.
It is. It is. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But that fixture is very, very attractive from a offensive projection and a defensive projection. We talked
It is Sunderland away though. That crowd is going to be going bananas.
Yeah, I Honestly, I think Sunderland has made two signings or two transfers, that being our, ex good friend Granit Xhaka, right? He's coming back. I believe he was at Leverkusen last season, and then Ten Hag signed on to be gaffer there, and he said, "I'm out of here." And then I think I also just saw that they completed a transfer for Chelsea prospect, and I'm definitely going to butcher this, Mark Guiu.
No, it's definitely how you say it.
I I mean Guiu, Guiu. Who's naming these people? But interestingly enough, we'll maybe talk about it in the budget section. He's going to be coming in at 4.5 mil and potentially nailed. I don't know if we've had a 4.5 mil nailed forward, someone that would be good enough to potentially play at Chelsea. There was talks of him playing up top even this season. Could be a ton of value there, but we'll get to it.
If he is at least getting consistent time, I think everybody's always looking for a 4.5 forward that's not just going to sit on the bench.
Yeah,
So that would be good.
that would be
Good,
really
good,
good.
good job keeping your eyes out on that.
I got two eyes. I got to use them.
We did skip when you went to Bowen because I know you're hot on him and he's in your squad. You're trying to convince yourself it's a good move, even though I disagree. You did skip right over Ekatike at 8.5.
Yeah, I mean, we
I
talked
think
about
that
him a
means you're
little
not
bit.
confident in him.
Well, we talked about him a little bit in our first episode. We were kind of talking about, midfielders and, what that might look like. Here's the issue for me. These guys that come in unproven. I watched Ekatike against Spurs home and away last season in Europa League. It was a semifinals, quarterfinals. I don't remember the exact round, but
Mhm.
point being, he is electric. He's a figure. He is a big player, very tall. He stands out. I don't know if him being exposed to 38 games against Premier League teams is going to yield the same results that he had in the Bundesliga. I'll just put it very bluntly. I need to see something. And the other thing with that, he's not so exorbitantly priced that I couldn't get to him. Right? So let's say, to your point, 1 million in the bank is a lot to start. If I go Bowen and I really like Ekatike by week 2 or 3, I can probably roll a transfer, take that 500,000, find it somewhere else, and I can go get him. So his preseason, he hasn't looked great. I don't know if he's returned at all in any of these preseason matches, but how much stock do you put into preseason too?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the extra 500,000 over Bowen is well worth it, even though he is unproven. But I think just like we said with Verts, he's playing with Salah, so everybody's focus is not going to their first thought is not going to be to cover him. He's going to have some space and some time to get himself up to speed. And I think for the 500,000, the opportunity to play a Liverpool mid or a Liverpool forward it has to be better than Bowen at West
Yeah,
Ham.
yeah. Well, and like you said, if Isak does make the move over to Anfield, then I mean, if you're going to pick a Liverpool forward, it's probably going to be Isak if you can make the funds work for yourself. The other thing to keep in mind,
I
you
don't know
only
if
have
it
to.
would. I
You
disagree
don't
with
think
that.
so? You don't think so?
To save 2 million for the same, you're essentially getting the same player, right?
Well,
Neither are they're
Isak's a
right,
little more proven.
right. They're forwards. Neither of them are on pens, and they're playing it with a great squad.
Yeah, I mean,
Why would you put?
positionally, I don't know. It, I hear your point. I don't
I
know.
think
I just
saving the 2 mil for two players that are going to play in similar positions and presumably the same amount of time. I think why would you not save it?
Yeah, you may have convinced me there. Well, we'll
But you
have
don't
to
have either
see.
in your squad, so I didn't need to convince you of anything.
No, I don't right now. Probably because when I picked my squad initially, he wasn't in the game yet. But the other thing that, I try to keep in mind is you only can choose 3 forwards in your squad. So, it's not like the midfield or in the defense where you've got to choose 5. You really have to spread those funds out. You could go really heavy, go Holland and pick 2 no names and have those 2 no names be on your bench and put the rest of your money into your mid and defense. And that might work out. So it's one of those things where, like, the way you construct your team, it definitely is going to, well, obviously, the way you construct your team is going to impact how you use your money. But I guess for me,
Wow, good insight.
I guess for
This is
me,
what people tune in for.
this is what people are tuning in for. I guess for me, I think midfielders have so much value this year that I don't really want to reach too often on forwards. So I'm probably not going to choose 2 premium forwards. I mean, I guess at 8 mil, if you want to classify Bowen as premium, He's more so premium based off of the fact that he's been reclassified and his point total is what it was. But I'd rather put that money into midfielders who have better chance to get goals, assists, defensive contribution points, clean sheets. It just feels like that's where the money should go.
I agree. I just don't agree with you choosing Bowen.
Well,
But
that's the beauty of the game.
yeah, we'll see how it works out.
All right. Should we switch gears now? Maybe look at some of those mid-range forwards?
Yeah, let's talk them. So what are we saying mid range is 6 to 7.5?
I think 6 to 7.5 would make sense. A lot of names come in to play here. If you want to look at Havertz, we talked about him a little bit. I think his minutes are going to be
Risky
impacted. Risky pick by Gyökeres.
I feel like he's only selected by 1.5%. I think we could skip him unless something changes with injury or formation.
Yeah,
probably a skip for now.
This is an interesting one.
He is.
So,
yeah, he's been in the news.
The question for him, he's kind of made it clear he doesn't really want to be at Brentford anymore.
He's not practicing with the squad.
Not practicing. I thought I saw a report that he actually left the training facility. I don't know.
I think so.
Yeah. So, you don't always believe what you read, but it doesn't sound like good news coming out of Brentford. I've made it clear. I think Brentford's on relegation watch this year. They feel so depleted. I mean, Vissa was in a position to really be kind of the center of that team. Now with, Ivan Toney, who can't pay his gambling debts, gone back in the Saudi league, and Brian Bomo now over at United. Vissa was supposed to be that guy. Doesn't seem like he's going to be this season. For me, he's a pass.
What do you think of his value if he does get scooped up elsewhere? So he's been linked with, if Isak leaves, I've heard he's been linked with Newcastle. Or actually, no, I think they made a formal offer and it was rejected, right?
I didn't see reports about that, but you're probably right. That would make sense.
Could be making it up. Either way, rumors of Newcastle, rumors of Spurs reuniting with Frank, and I think rumors of United as well.
Yeah, and I hate to say it because Whistler was in my squad last season. He was a very consistent returner. I really shouldn't be bad talking him so much as the situation that he's been putting himself in, or that he's subject to being at the club. But I think when you look at some of those other 7.5 mil forwards, João Pedro, who's over at Chelsea, Mateta over at Palace, even Chris Wood over at Forest. I mean, if I'm going to choose 7.5 mil, I'm going to choose one of those four before I choose Vista. Out of those four that I just mentioned, I think Solanke has to be your selection.
Agree. And I think we kind of talked about it at some point, but he underperformed last year. He was riddled with injuries. Spurs altogether were basically non-existent in the Premier League. They were focusing on Europe. At 7.5, I think he's poised for a great return on the investment there. He's gonna be the starter. And he was highly selected when he came over because he was priced prior to being a Spurs player. So last year, he was highly owned, and then with injuries, he kind of forgot about basically. And so I think people are probably sleeping on the potential value there.
Yeah. And I mean, not that we should be really targeting forwards based on DEFCON points, but Solanke is one of those forwards who's not afraid to track back, play a little bit of defense. So it's possible that he's going to get to that 12 point on the CBIT, but I'm not going to hold my breath for those 2 extra points.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about Chris Wood, right? Which Chris Wood are we really going to get? Are we going to get the guy who scored 20 goals last season? Or are we going to get the guy who was at Newcastle, was a solid forward up top, but really didn't jump off the page? We'll see how Forrest responds. They were able to keep Gibbs White in their squad. He looks thrilled to be there, as a knife is held behind my back while I say that. Alenga out of the squad. We're going to see if Wood can kind of recapture some of that magic that he did have last season. I look at João Pedro. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the one that's probably could have the higher return than Solanke would be João Pedro if he gets the consistent starts. 7.5, he got the big move over to Chelsea. He was pretty good last year with Brighton. It just comes down to minutes and how consistently those minutes are going to be applied. They signed him and Delap this summer. Jackson's still there, although it sounds like they're trying to shop him around and potentially be used in some trades. or transfers. I think he was potentially linked to the Rodgers transfer as well. So it seems like Jackson's not going to be the starter. That being said, they still have a huge squad. Although
Yeah.
Although, I guess forwards wise, if Jackson leaves and Cuckoo's also linked to leave, Delap is, I can't imagine he would start over João Pedro. But I guess there's not too much consistency or too many options from a forward perspective, at least within FPL. However, they want line up on the field is different. But if he does get those starts, I think 7 with Palmer and the other players around him, I think he's potentially the best 7.5 choice pending minutes.
Yeah. That's I agree with you. I think he's probably as nailed as a Chelsea player can be outside of Palmer. I don't love that he's not going to be on pens, right? Like, I know, and I don't want to contradict what I just said, but he's not going to take pens from Palmer.
Agree. But do you know he's nailed? I mean, that's a big statement for Chelsea, right?
I guess I don't. Well, as nailed as you can be for Chelsea, right? Like nailed for them means like you're probably in the first team selection and you're going to see minutes at some point that game, whether it's the first 60 or the last 30. It's tough to tell, but I guess you're right. I mean, outside of Palmer, do we know for a fact he's going to get João Pedro's going to get 90 minutes a game? It might be a little bit too early to tell. We'll see how Maresca has those guys line up and how, kind of what his rotations look like. I don't personally know enough about Nicholas Jackson, his pros and kind of advantages over João Pedro. Do we see, in games against, maybe more physical teams, do we see João Pedro in there? Do we see teams that have maybe a higher line? We see Nicholas Jackson in there, right, to kind of break that a little bit. I don't know if Maresca is going to get that specific or if he's going to say, hey, here's the best 11 I can put out there.
Yeah.
I'm going to run this every week and we're going to play our game. We're going to dictate how this game is played.
And they did sign Pedro Neto, right? And he plays wide right, but he played up top at Wolves too, as well. No,
Yeah.
or maybe he's a two. I just remember him he's always up there. So maybe he wouldn't be lined up as a proper striker, but there are options, and I think he has the highest potential of the 7.5s, like I said. But spoiler, I do have Solanke in my squad just because I think he's nailed to start, and he should be much better than he was last year.
Yeah. The only thing that I heard today, and I haven't seen the highlights, but I did hear that he went down with a slight injury scare for the game. Nothing major, more of a knock. So could impact his availability for game week 1, but we'll see how he recovers. You hate to see these players in these preseason friendlies that are seemingly, not really for anything other than just match fitness, also to grab a few bucks, wherever they're playing.
Some teams win trophies during these, so
That's very true. That's true. That's true. That's true.
Can't discredit those, but yeah, other friendlies are.
Yeah. But you hate to see the injuries, But so we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that. Any other I mean, I think we kind of hit all the 7.5s. To be honest, there's two forwards priced at. There's one forward priced at 7 mil. That being Evan Nilsson. I think a decent amount of hype around him and his potential for what a full season with Bournemouth could be. But that being said, I don't know. I mean, if I can reach for Evan Nilsson, I'm going to probably try to reach for that 7.5 mil. I do think Evan Nilsson is a more attractive pick, and I think I don't want to talk about how he looks, but I think he's a more attractive pick than say a Chris Wood or a Mateta or even João Pedro because he's going to be nailed. I don't believe he's going to be on pens, but he might be second choice taker behind maybe Semenyo or Kluivert. So Evan Nilsson at 7 mil, I think, is going to be a pretty popular pick amongst managers.
Yeah, he had 10 goals, 5 assists in 28 games. That's pretty good.
Pretty good.
He did miss one penalty and have one red card. So, you get what you get, but don't get upset.
Yeah. I mean, anything else to say about him? I mean,
Evan Nilsson, no. He's one of those, if he's being consistent for a run that lines up with a green stretch for Bournemouth in mid-season, maybe worth a punt, but he's not, I don't think, worthy of a start of the season.
Yeah. So that kind of brings us to kind of the lower tier, that mid-tier, mid-priced forward category kind of, it falls off pretty quickly. Lots of forwards this season at 6 mil and below. Let's just rapid fire through them. I mean, at the 6.5 price, I look at Danny Welbeck. I look at Raul Jimenez. Don't touch Darwin. I don't touch Højlund. Richie over at Spurs, I don't touch. Strand Larson is a pretty popular pick right now. Looks to be nailed at Wolves to start. And had some decent returns towards the end of last campaign. In that 6.5 range, who's really standing out? Is there anyone worth really talking about?
We mentioned Delop. If at all he starts, I think he could be a good option to get into the Chelsea squad. But I don't think to start the season I would be backing him. Elbeck, again, I think I put him in with Evan Nelson. If there's a good run of fixtures and he's in form, worth taking a shot, but I wouldn't hold him long term. Gabriel Jesus at 6.5. If he does move somewhere, he could be a value pick if he becomes a starter, but that's a big if.
I love that.
And I don't know. Højlund at 6.5, I don't think at United. Yeah. He has just been given too many chances and not delivered to even be considered, I'd say.
Yeah.
And in Strand Larson, he has the potential, but I just really have no confidence in Wolves attacking. It might be a general broad stroke look at them, but I just really after Jota and then Neto left Wolves, those are really the only two that in my FPL history I'd been fans of from Wolves.
Yeah, it just feels like, and I was kind of hitting upon this earlier, the forwards kind of pick themselves in your squad, right? Like if you go Holland, your options are very limited. If you go Isak, your options are still decently limited. The question is, okay, do I want to go, 3 guys in the 7.5 to 8 mil range and kind of be somewhere around, 21 to 22 mil of your funds dedicated to forwards? Or do you spend 14 on Holland and maybe another 7, maybe 6, let's say 6.5 on Strand Larson? So now you're at like 20, and then you just kind of bank someone on your bench at 4.5. So it comes back to that strategy again. I don't really see anyone in the 6 to 6.5 range that would be worth reaching for me. But that being said, there are some value picks in kind of that 5.5 range. You mentioned Beto on Everton. I think it was maybe our first episode. As someone who, I don't really know a ton about his game. I know his name is not just Beto. I think his name is like a lot longer. Yeah. Noberto, Bersike, Gomes, Bedunkal. Like Beto is.
That's a sick name.
That's a really cool name. Like honestly,
that's one I would want to learn.
That's a name. If he went by that, I would have him in my squad, no doubt. Beto is just so bland, but I don't know. I mean, am I gonna? These are guys that you don't necessarily have to reach for, but the difference in a 5.5 versus 4.5 is a huge difference, in my opinion.
It would be great to have him as a third spot, but
yeah,
that million when we're saying not Liverpool, when we're saying midfielders are so valuable, that million really can hurt you if you're not putting it into another starter.
Yeah. So a few names, I think, for me in the 5.5 area, just to highlight. We talked about Beto. Jokes aside, I mean, he's going to be someone that with Dominic Calvert-Lewin out of the squad at Everton, he's going to be up top with NDA. I'm not probably saying that wrong, who had some nice returns last season. But again, it's Everton attack. How do you feel about that? That's for you in your own time. Muniz, I believe. So Rodrigo Muniz Carvalho over at Fulham. I actually did see links today that I saw news today that he was linked to actually head over to Newcastle. So if and when Isak does go, Muniz could come in, be that nailed 5.5 mil starter at a big club like Newcastle.
Could be good.
He could be good. So that's a name I'm keeping an eye on.
He was in and out of my squad the last 2 years. He just never got the start consistently or even off the bench consistently, swapping with Jimenez. So he's definitely a pass for me unless he does move.
Now, one name here, Ross Perot over at Leeds. His name's not Ross. His name's Joel, but, we can have fun with it. Coming up from the championship, did have some good numbers last campaign. 19 goals, 7 assists, at a 5.5 mil price point. That could be a player that has a lot of value. The only question, of course, right, are Leeds going to be able to attack and score at the same level that they did with seemingly lesser competition? No disrespect to the teams in the championship, but he's going to be someone that's nailed I don't see Patty Bamford, who is down at 5 mil, coming in and taking those minutes away just because Leeds did perform so well last season in the championship. It's one of those things where, you got to use and go with what got you to the Prem. Perot was that guy for them.
Yeah. And then that's really it for the fives. I mean, looking down to the 4.5s, this is where you're always looking for anybody who will get a late week 2, week 3 transfer to a club and maybe get some points. Mark Gui
Nailed it.
at 4.5. If he does move, I'm sure that's one that his price is gonna skyrocket. Maybe worth stashing him on your bench now. If you do have a 4.5, this is where you should try and find that one that there's rumors about when they move. Try and benefit from the price bump if possible. But other than that, it's just a shot in the dark.
Yeah. I think at that budget price, like you said, it's really Muniz. If he makes a move to Newcastle, it's Gueye. I don't even know how to say his name. Mark Gruyere, we'll call him. If he actually is getting those minutes at Sunderland, and potentially Ross Joel Perot.
Yeah, Stan Marsh is there at 4.5 too, but who knows?
Not as if it was Randy Marsh, I think I'd be there. But so I mean, we've kind of gone through the list of forwards. Obviously, there's not as many forwards in the game as there are midfielders and defenders. So your attention in that area doesn't necessarily have to be as deep. But that being said, it just comes back to strategy. We've mentioned it so many times. Do you want to spend a lot of money on your forwards and potentially have fewer funds to cover some of those midfield and defensive positions? Or are you comfortable with maybe having 2 or even 3 and starting 2 or 3 of those mid-tier forwards? I know for me, I initially did have Holland in my draft, and we'll open it up and kind of do some live tinkering with forwards, but I have slowly convinced myself to move away from Holland.
Interesting. Away from Holland, and you're more confident in Bowen than Holland.
Just well,
That makes the Bowen pick that much more surprising.
for when you say it that way, now I feel really stupid. But for a single week punt, all the teams come in to week 1 with no points, no goals allowed, no goals forced. Like everyone comes in with a clean slate. So, West Ham, I want to say they're only 2 campaigns away from qualifying for Europe. And a lot of those players, I believe, are still held over. Bowen's been around, Paqueta's been around. Maybe the back line looks a little bit different. I mean, is West Ham one of those teams that just kind of underperformed last season? Or are they going to be able to recreate some of that magic from a couple seasons past? It's going to be interesting.
They really underperformed. They were as bad as Spurs, and they lost Kudus.
Your favorite?
Yeah, he's a good player. Who are they going to bring in to replace him that's going to turn them?
Time will tell. Maybe no one.
Time
What
will
do you
tell.
think? Should we jump into tinkering with forwards, or should we move into goalkeepers?
Why don't you goalkeepers quick? We could talk through it, but I think it's a much shorter conversation. Actually, before we do that, I think we have another sponsor this week.
We do, Jim. Today's episode is brought to you by Vandalay Industries, importers, exporters, and your trusted source for fine latex goods, allegedly. Whether you're expanding globally, managing delicate supply chains, or just need a cover job for a nosy neighbor, Vandalay Industries has you semi-officially covered. Founded by visionary entrepreneur Art Vandalay, this mysterious conglomerate has its hands in everything, from marine biologist consulting to architecture and beyond. Need an alibi? Need some latex? Need a little plausible deniability? Then say it with me. Vandalay Industries. It's real enough if you believe it is. Ask your nearest Seinfeld fan for details. All right, and back to the pod.
All right. So talking about goalkeepers, right? So there's really not the same premium, mid-priced, and budget because there's only 20 keepers that are consistently playing. So realistically, it's premium keepers, and then your mid and budget are grouped together because it's rare that you're going to find a 4 that's starting consistently unless there's an injury.
What is your strategy traditionally, Jimbo, when it comes to keepers? I know a lot of folks, they'll try to look for at least a keeper that is nailed. Even better if it's a 4 mil keeper that's nailed. But I know in the past you've splurged on keepers. You're not afraid to spend 5.5 on a keeper if it means you get into a certain team's defense, say Ederson on City. But maybe talk a little bit about kind of your strategy that you've employed in the past.
I've dabbled in both. You either get a 5.5 or 6 mil that's guaranteed to start, like Ederson or Allison or Pickford, or you find two keepers that are 4.5 or 4.5 and a 5 or 4.5 and a 4 if you're lucky, and rotate back and forth depending on whose fixture you like better that week. Over my FPL career, I've gone back and forth. Probably had the most success with going back and forth between two, or maybe it's perceived success because when you do have Ederson in goal and they concede, it feels so painful because historically I'd use that as my cover against a premium City defender. So trying to bank on his clean sheet to, cancel out Vardiol's clean sheet, for instance. But when they concede and then Vardiol goes and scores or gets an assist, it's a tough pill to swallow. Last year, and I think the year before, maybe the year before was the last year I went with the expensive Ederson pick. And after keeping him for the majority of the season, I threw my hands up and I went with the two budget keepers and tried to just optimize based on the game week.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I think keepers, obviously, they play a big role. You're always going to start one every week, but your expectation for them has to be much lower than that would be a normal defensive player. So, like you kind of talked about, a lot of times, folks will say, oh, I really want to have, let's say, Arsenal defense, but I can't afford Gabriel or Saliba at 6 mil, but I'll look at David Raya. He's only 5.5 mil. I'll get the same clean sheet point. Well, yes, that is true. But the counterpoint to that is you're really limited, right? So Saliba, Gabriel, they can give you a goal off of a header, off a set piece. They could give you an assist. They're going to qualify for defensive contribution points if they're active and kind of doing their job as center backs. Keepers aren't going to do that. You might get the occasional assist. There's usually one or two per season amongst all of the keepers, where the opposition's defense has just kind of fallen asleep, and Ederson's usually good for one a season, or maybe Allison over at Liverpool is good for one a season. You're really kind of banking on things that are out of their control to get them kind of those differential points. Things like penalties saved, saves in general. I forget exactly how many saves a keeper needs to make in order to get an extra point. But the point being,
it's three saves.
Is it 3 saves?
Yeah.
So every 3 saves is an additional point. And I do think that if they're making saves and they've got the clean sheet going, they are kind of positioning themselves for some of those bonus points as well. There have been some tweaks to the bonus point system this season, and we can talk about those in another episode. But all in all, I mean, if you're debating where to spend your money, I don't think there's anything wrong with having one premium goalkeeper, but I think 2 is just a crazy, crazy strategy.
I've never seen anybody do that.
At least not off the rip.
No.
If for some reason, you've picked some budget guys, budget players who have gone, way up in value, and you somehow managed to bank an extra half mil or full mil by, week 10 or week 12, and you said, I'm going to spend that money on a keeper. I mean, more power to you. You're probably winning your league, because I don't think I'd have the balls to do that myself.
Yeah. Without an injury that, you're just covering somebody until they're back. Yeah.
Right. And keepers aren't likely to be subbed on, usually, unless there's an injury. Teams are going to put out who their first choice keeper is. It's one of those positions, in my opinion, that, if you're not performing, you're going to get kicked to the can. I think about like Onana over at United. He seemingly could not let enough goals in, and he still keeps his job. So it's one of those things where, and we've seen the style of play change so much, where keepers now, they're really prioritized the ability to play out of the back. So, you think about Raya, who replaced Ramsdale. Ramsdale had a pretty good campaign. I think this was maybe 2 years ago now for Arsenal.
Yep.
But Arteta was quoted basically saying, yeah, he can make saves, but he's not good enough at his feet. He's not good enough for us to win in Europe. So they went out and, spent big bucks to go get Raya over from Brentford. So, here's what it comes down to, right? There are 4 or 5.5 million keepers that are available to be selected today. Out of those 4, Raya, Jordan Pickford, Allison over at Liverpool, and Ederson at City. If you were to splurge and spend on one, who would you pick today, and why?
I would pick Raya. I think Arsenal's defense with Saliba and Gabriel being so consistent. Yes, clean sheets were not as abundant last year, but the play of those two, I think they've given me the most confidence in the last couple of years. Probably next, I'd say Ederson. The only question there is, who is the center back pair that's starting? Are we still confident in them moving forward? But then again, Rodri's back. So that gives them a bump. Yeah, I'd say Ederson or Araya would be the two that I would go with. Pickford is a smart, consistent choice, but to be fair, a lot of the extra points he gets were because he had to make so many saves, right? They were playing from behind a lot, and he's great at those saves. But really, do you want your keeper in a position that they need to be making 6 saves a week and then get you 2 points and in the running for a bonus, or would you rather the more safe clean sheet? And then Allison, with Trent leaving, with Robertson presumably losing his starting spot, they're looking at a new back line essentially. Um, he's just a wait and see for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when I look at that list, I think for me, Ederson is a little risky. They just brought in Trafford. Brought Trafford back. I think they had initially loaned him or sold him to Burnley, and he shined last season in the championship. And now he's back at City. Is that in anticipation of Ederson on his way out?
Yeah,
Trafford,
that was big money, right? It was like 30 million.
yeah, I mean, not not big for City, but big for keeper and for
Big
someone
for
who
backup, yeah.
for backup. Yeah. So I mean, Trafford at 5 mil. I think if he, not to kind of switch gears, but he could be someone that looks to challenge Ederson. So I'm probably myself gonna stay clear of Ederson. Allison, I frankly think he is a little bit too risky in goal. I think that he's good for at least one or two defensive, just like, what is he doing a
Yep,
game?
trying to be too fancy.
Trying to be too fancy. You've got a slightly re-envisioned back line. Van Dijk is still going to be there. Konate is still going to be a holdover, but new defenders out on the wings. We don't know how much time Robo is going to get. Does that help Allison or does that hurt him? We'll have to see. For me, if I can get a half a mil more, I'm going to go get Gabriel or Saliba. So for me, Pickford is actually the guy here. I know you said too, and the reason he's making all these saves and getting all of these opportunities is because Everton, they're playing from behind. They might be leaving themselves exposed. That's part of their game, right? They want their keeper to be making those saves. James Tarkowski, who we talked a lot about on the Defender app, he would have stood to gain, I think it was 44 defensive contribution points. But just because he's getting those opportunities doesn't mean that they're scrambling. It could just be that Tarkowski is a very active center back, and he's trying to get into and make plays. So it's one of those things where the numbers could be somewhat deceiving. That being said, I'm actually steering clear of all four of these premium keepers to at least begin the campaign. Yeah, for me, I think there's money to be spent in other places that have a larger potential return. As far as strategy goes, I think for me, I've always tried to choose two keepers, ideally 4.5 mil or less, that have complementing fixture runs. So what I mean by that is basically I'd like to have two keepers where it's very clear who I'm going to start each week, and each week they have a favorable fixture. I know there were a couple of keepers last season where it was very easy to do that. If I remember correctly, I think it was Verbruggen over at Brighton and Flecken over at Brentford. If you actually lined up their fixtures from like week 1 to week 38, there was a case to be made that if the teams performed to the color of the fixture difficulty rating, it was very clear that you could have both of these keepers. They were not highly priced, but you'd have a favorable matchup, high likelihood for a clean sheet every single week. So for me, I'm going to probably try to do that again this season. I have not been able to identify which keepers or potential keeper rotation pair that I might go with. Sometimes you see keepers move within the transfer window right up until the end. One name that I think we've seen kind of pop up a lot right now is actually at 5 mil, and that being Matt Sells. Over at Forest, had a really strong campaign last season. I believe he was, if not top keeper, within the top five. Really performed as if a 5.5 or a premium goalkeeper. But we talked a lot about in the Defender app. I mean, are they going to be able to recreate that defensive magic? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so. And the only other thing to add on the two keeper strategy, it also gives you cover for injuries or a red card. There's nothing worse than when you have one forward or sorry, one keeper, and for whatever reason they're not playing that week, and you need to burn a transfer on a keeper swap. It's painful, especially if you don't have enough funds in the bank to get higher. You're forced into one that you don't love. So the two keeper system gives you that flexibility that you don't have to burn a transfer later in the season, even if the fixtures may not always be perfect, but at least you're not forced to do something you don't want to.
Yeah, and that's an awesome point too. You never want to put yourself in a position where, you're gridlocked and you can't make a move when you ultimately do need to get out. Now, that being said, we probably have more chances this season than ever to change your squad. Up to five
Very good point.
transfers
Very
can
good
be
point.
rolled over. You're going to have AFCON. I believe everyone's going to get five transfers for that. Two wild cards, two free hits. So it's one of those things where, like, don't don't get too disappointed if your keeper is not returning, because there's going to be chances to bring them in, to bring new guys in to kind of give you some of those points.
Did you ever bank the full five last year? So last year was the first year they introduced it. I never got to that point because the beginning of the season I was in injury hell for a month, and then I
I
was
don't
playing from
think I ever
behind.
got to five. I think I got to four. I do know that in 38 game weeks, I only made 31 transfers the entire
Wow,
season. Um,
that's great.
that was intentional too. There were a lot of game weeks where, I just I felt like I had a good team. So for those that maybe aren't totally new, a lot of times league managers or league owners, they'll run kind of some side or mini leagues off to this outside of just like the standard table. So our commissioner, shout out Austin Magaro, he likes to run kind of some side competitions to keep the season interesting. And one of the things that he does is he runs kind of these spring and fall cups similar to what the game offers. And really, your table position is so important in those cups. Your game week scores are so important that for me, I never wanted to take a hit and potentially, take more transfers to lose points, lose table position. So, for me, it was, unless I really had to make a transfer, there weren't too many times last season where I really was forced to. You, on the other hand, you had a lot of injuries you were fighting, so I think your transfer number was a little higher than mine.
Yeah, last year was by far my worst year in FPL. Ready to move on.
And you still won a cup, I believe.
I did win a cup in
Yeah,
the cup run by the through the
yeah,
FPL app.
yeah. So I think just to kind of close the loop on keepers here. I think when it comes to keepers, for me, I'm gonna look for that pair of keepers that are budget, to low cost. Maybe reach for that 5 mil keeper if the money's there. But I'm gonna look for two keepers that are ideally nailed and they have complementing fixture pairs where every week I can be confident that I'm starting someone with no more than a gray fixture difficulty rating, a fixture difficulty rating of 3 or less. So that'd be 1, 2, or 3. Looking for those green fixtures myself.
Do you want to reveal who you got in right now?
I think we could, but before we get into tinkering, anything else that we want to highlight on keepers?
No, I don't know. I don't want to say it's a less strategic position because it's not. Those are important points, and they give you cover against defenders that you don't have, or double up or triple up on defenders that you do have. But I think it more comes down to strategy of how you're using your funds rather than the specific keeper.
Yeah,
Right. So any of those top four at 5.5, those are going to be a step above the next group, and those are a step above the 4.5s. So it's really how much you're allocating as a whole, I think, is the bigger question than which specific keeper you have in.
yeah. Yeah, and I think the only other thing, and then we'll get into some live tinkering. Just be wary of some of the team selected percentages when it comes to keepers, right? So, for example, you take Dubravka. Dubravka, he's a keeper over at Newcastle. He's listed at 4 mil. He is selected by 11.3% as of 11:04 p.m. on July 31st. 2025. That would rank him as, let's see, three, four, five, the sixth highest selected keeper. There's nothing that tells me today that Nick Pope is not the guaranteed starter over at Newcastle. So, it's one of those things where, sometimes players, they'll look to, who are other managers selecting? Maybe I need to have cover. Just be careful because you might end up committing to someone who really, unless an injury happens or a massive drop in form occurs, they probably won't actually ever get any minutes. So just one
Right.
thing
Yep.
that I wanted to highlight there. But enough about that. Why don't we get into the team? I think we went with me first last time. Do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, sure, sure. So for keeper reveal, I have two 4.5s. I have Melier at Leeds at 4.5. week 1 against Everton. I think that's a strong start. And then I also have Jose Sa at Wolves. They're playing City week 1, so I'm definitely not going to start him. But those are the two I think I was most confident in. I know I've said I don't really have much faith in Wolves, but Sa I think has gotten those consistent save points similar to Pickford over the last couple of years. The clean sheets are likely not going to be there, but those are the two I have at 4.5 that I'm at least confident that they will be the starters, and I could bounce back and forth as I see fit.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
Melier is an interesting one for me. So he right now is. Do you know for a fact if he's nailed at Leeds?
I don't. I don't.
Okay. The only reason, so two reasons that I asked. One, I mean, obviously, and I said it earlier, right? Like part of these teams that are coming up from the championship, right? Like a lot of times you see them try to spend big. They obviously get the revenue from being promoted, so they'll try to bring players in. Melier was actually the keeper back when Leeds was in the Premier just a few seasons ago. A lot of, I would say, I don't even want to say mishaps, but Leeds really weren't known for their defense. I don't think Melier helped the cause. There were a lot of times he was letting in goals that he probably should have saved. Bringing Melier in for me right now, I probably wouldn't start him just because I don't know how I feel yet about Leeds defensively. The other question that I have about Leeds, Carl Darlow, who is a well-known Premier League keeper, he's kind of bounced around with teams. He's coming in at 4 mil. He is also on Leeds. Has Melier done enough to really secure his spot as that first team starting keeper nailed for 90? I don't know. If I look at Darlow's numbers, he's also one of those players. So he's coming in at 4 mil. He's selected at 8.2%. So if I look at Leeds, Melier is at 4.5. He's only selected at 1.2%. So I get a little bit nervous that maybe there's something there as someone who didn't really follow Leeds a ton in the championship. Maybe there's something there that we don't know. So that would be just kind of my two concerns as far as the Melier pick. I mean, have you heard anything different?
I have not heard it. I have not researched enough about the incoming squad. I know that he was the starter last year, and that's what I was basing it on.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
to your point,
Yeah.
yes, you shouldn't go based on assumptions. There's always an extra level of research you could do, but that's what that pick came from.
Yeah. And I think you're not going to get burned by Melier because, like you said, I mean, looking at their opening fixtures, so they've got Everton week 1, Arsenal week 2, Newcastle week 3, Fulham week 4. If you're pairing him with who did you say? Jose Sa?
Yes.
So you're going to start Jose Sa. Sorry, you're going to start Melier week 1 against
Yeah.
Everton,
Versus Everton.
and then you would move into Jose Sa for weeks 2 and 3. Yeah. So I mean that rotation makes total sense when you think about it from a fixture difficulty rating rotation perspective. Week 4, I would lean right now. I would guess you'd probably go Melier just based on the fact that Jose Sa is going to be playing Newcastle. But if Isak isn't there, what does Newcastle's attack look like? Game week 4, it might be a little bit more telling. So that offensive barrage that Newcastle really threw at opponents last season, it may not be there, at least not to start the campaign. They might still be kind of feeling some of the aftershocks of Isak's departure. That could be interesting.
Time will tell.
Time will tell. Were there any other keepers that you were thinking about bringing in, or that you might still think about bringing in right now?
No, at the moment, I have the 2 at the 4.5 mark, and to go through the rest of my squad. So I have no changes to my defenders. So I have Moreno, De Kuiper, Esteve, James, and Maguire. I did make 2 changes to the midfield following our discussion last week. So I have Saka, Matoma, Saka, Wirtz, and Fernandez, who I had. I did switch from Foden and Madison to Marmoush and Matoma. So bumped up the 0.5 mil to go from Foden to Marmoush,
I
and
like
then
that a lot.
drop down to Matoma.
I like that a lot. Matoma's coming in at 6 mil or 6.5.
6.5, yeah.
I really like that as a 6.5.
So I really wish I could have that other 0.5 mil, and that's why I can't. I'm already down a 0.5 mil from what I want, so I can't put another 0.5 mil into my keepers. And then for forwards, I do have Holland, Solanke, and I did a live transfer as we were talking here to bring in Mark Guiui in hopes that he does get transferred. But I did have Ashley Barnes just as a throwback pick. I don't know if he's ever going to touch the pitch, but he was my 4.5. So I switched to Guiui in hopes to make some money. I think it has to be with 3 vowels in a row.
Those French, man, they just love their vowels.
So what I'm considering, I would like if I could get Solanke up to 8.5 or a 9 to get Ekatike or Watkins in. I would like Matoma to get back up to James Madison, and
7.
yeah, at 7. So that's $1.5 million that I'm short for those spots, but I really can't find it anywhere at the moment. Couple of changes, nothing too crazy. So I'm loving my squad, but we'll see what the transfer market does and at the end of the window
Yeah.
here.
You sound like me about 3 days ago. I had this moment where I was just like, I'm really strangling my team by forcing Holland and Salah into the squad. So, just kind of starting at the back line, we'll go through. I have made a couple changes as well, and I'm still not done. To be very honest with you, I have spent very little time on my keepers. Kelleher over at Brentford is a very popular pick, the most popular pick right now in the game, coming in at almost 32% of managers bringing him in. Here's my take on that. Their fixture run to start is not awful. They have Forest week 1, they've got Villa week 2, Sunderland week 3. Kelleher, I think for me, he was someone that at times displaced Allison as Liverpool's starting keeper. Back when Klopp was still there, he was very much on record saying, Kelleher is a phenomenal keeper. He would start in any other club in the world, but he chooses to be here. So, Kelleher finally moving out of Anfield, kind of getting that chance to really be that first choice keeper. I think a lot of folks are clinging to that. In addition, right, put that in combination with the fact that Forest attack, isn't necessarily the most fearsome in the league. Villa, right now they've still got our boy Ollie Watkins up top, but if Rodgers leaves, right now you're maybe looking at someone like Mullen to kind of step in and play that attacking role. I don't know how daunting or intimidating that is. And then we already talked about Sunderland, right? I mean, they're going to have Mark Guigui in there starting, but still, it's Sunderland, right? So, if you're going to pick someone from a keeper perspective, you want that Sunderland fixture if you can get it. Kelleher right now at 32%. I understand it. I have him in my squad. I'm not committed to him at this point. I'm still exploring options for keepers. Now, my other keeper right now, and it's purely just because of money, I had to fill my squad out, is I mentioned Darlow. So that whole point that I brought up with Leeds was the reason I brought it up was because I have
Wishful
looked at the
thinking.
numbers myself.
Wishful thinking.
Yeah, I may have just shown my hand a little bit there, but if he is going to be the starter at 4 mil, we saw it last year. I think it was Joel Ward. I wanted, no, not Joel Ward, Danny Ward. I forget his exact name, but he was the keeper at Leicester. He came in. I think he's Australian. I think he started the campaign at 4 mil, and he was first choice keeper. A lot of folks clung to him because if you can get a keeper at 4 mil who's nailed, even if the defense isn't great, you know, you're just looking for those 2 points for the 90 minutes. A lot of folks went that route. Didn't ultimately work out. I think most people moved on pretty quickly because Leicester defense was pretty shitty. The point being, if I can even keep Darlow there or any, insert 4 mil starting keeper there, I might be able to shed a 500,000 and, move from Kelleher from 4.5 to someone like I mentioned, Matt Sells, who I really like. So he's got Brentford, Palace, West Ham to start. And then game week 4, they have Arsenal. So I'm still tinkering around with my keepers. Do not lock me in here. Initially, I would be okay with starting Kelleher if I had to, but I don't love it. So we'll see what happens.
It is interesting that you are putting Brentford on relegation watch, and I'm putting Wolves on them, and we both picked the keepers from those respective squads.
Well, I mean, I think it comes back to, right, like we don't necessarily see teams, I guess the teams that are in relegation issue, it's usually because they can't score enough goals. I mean, yes, they're going to let in goals, but it's not like they're losing games 8 or 9-0, right? They're losing maybe 2-0, 3-0. So there's going to be opportunities when teams are scoring 2 or 3 points. There's going to be opportunities for them to get those saves. And as you mentioned, 3 saves is a point. So I can kind of see the strategy of pick the keepers of the teams that are most likely to concede because, let's say you choose someone like Raya at 5.5 mil and Arsenal let in a goal. Well, you could make the argument, hey, I should have chosen, the team that has an even worse defense, because I assumed they're going to concede, but now their keeper is going to really be active back there and try to get some saves. Arsenal
Yeah,
might concede
it's
a goal,
kind of
and
the opposite way
Raya,
of thinking.
yeah, exactly. So there's two trains of thought there, but I don't know if necessarily one is better than the other. I think if you're depending on your keeper to be a major source of your points, I mean you're really putting your neck
You
out
probably
there for the
shouldn't
whole
do
season.
it. Yeah.
Yeah,
All right, let's keep going. When we're
let's keep going.
running
So
along here.
just for the sake of going through the rest of the squad, I didn't touch my back line. I still have Konza, Guardiol, Milankovic, Poro, Wan-Bissaka starting my back line. Spoiler, I did sell Holland. So I moved off of Holland to open up some funds, and I made a last minute transfer right before we jumped on the call here. So I moved from, I believe I had Brennan Johnson and Bruno Fernandez. I moved them to Palmer and Granit Xhaka, who's over at Sunderland now, 5 mil. I'm banking on 90 minutes and those defensive contributions. So I brought in Palmer, I brought in Florian Wirtz, I moved off of Holland, and I brought in Bowen. So the team is a little bit more balanced. I actually love my midfield. Right now, I probably would be forced to go 4-5-1, maybe 4-4-2, depending on the matchups week to week. But I think this gives me a little bit more balance. Palmer at 10.5, I think, is a better pick than Saka. And I know we talked about midfielders already, so I don't want to rehash that. But I think the balance here, I'm a little bit more comfortable with. To me, it really came down to, can Bowen, Palmer, and Wirtz outscore Holland, Brennan Johnson, and Bruno Fernandez? I think it's going to be close. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know.
You don't seem convinced.
I'm not convinced on Bowen.
Well,
I like
so like I said
I
though,
like picking up Palmer. I agree. He'll outscore Bruno, but he's also 1.5 million more. Yeah, I think this is more balanced and it gives you more room to move around. But if you're saying you brought in Bowen for week one and then you're gonna move him out, where are you gonna put that into? Are you gonna move it in to bump up Rogers or Zaka?
yeah, I mean, right now, if I just looked at my team as it's built right now, as it's constructed, the the thing I would probably have to do is move Bowen. Actually, instead of going up to Watkins, I'd probably have to move him down to a 7.5, so I could get another half mil, so I could actually cover a goalkeeper, right? Like I don't love having a 4 mil keeper that I don't know is nailed. So, do I go
That seems
Bowen
like a
to?
seems like a silly way to start the season though.
I know, I know.
If your starting striker is for week one and then you have to move him out to bring in a keeper, that's gonna be
Man,
painful.
a backup keeper at that. So it's a
Yeah,
question
that's
of,
gonna be painful.
we look at the 7.5 or even 7 mil. I don't see myself going from an 8 mil Bowen down to a 6.5 or any of those budget guys that we talked about. So, is it Bowen to Chris Wood? I don't know if I love that either. So I'm definitely not done.
Maybe Joe Pedro.
Maybe. But if I'm gonna do that, I mean, Evan Nilsson, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not there yet. I'm getting closer for sure, but I got to spend some time. I'm actually doing some traveling this weekend, so maybe I'll have a little bit of me time on the flight. Just me and my demons trying to figure out, who I can choose to fill out my squad.
You gonna pay for the in-flight Wi-Fi, or you gonna print out everybody's prices on sheets and shuffle through it?
I think the in-flight Wi-Fi might be worth it for this time, but sometimes you can't just beat the old-fashioned pen and paper. But
Your wife will understand.
yeah, this is important. Anyway, anything else, Jimbo? We talked forwards, we talked keepers. Anything else our listeners should know?
No, I know this was a little bit longer than our previous ones, but we did cover two positions. So yeah, excited for some more transfer news coming in, see how that shakes up the team, and maybe brings to light some other position players that we weren't really considering at the moment. But I feel like my tinkering at the moment has stalled until something shakes loose. So excited to see where the season brings us.
I think when this episode is posted, we will officially be in the same month that our precious game returns. We're getting closer. I couldn't be more excited. Having said all that, we've still got some great content coming before season begins, season drops. Please do continue to tune in, subscribe, follow. Like I said in the past, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcast. We have our YouTube channel. Please go give us a subscription up there. We post everything up there. Drop a comment. Join our mini league. I'll put the code to our mini league again in the description. And we'll be back soon. So until then, happy tinkering.
Best of luck. Talk soon.
Draft dreams rise like morning sun, chasing points, the game's begun. Big decisions week by week, fantasy glory's what we seek. Pick your squad, the clock won't wait. Captain choice will seal your